Bien, bonjour à tous. So Andrew, thank you. Thank you for sharing that day with our French fan for Mintinbox.net. First question, can you explain, you explained that one day a friend of yours asked you to make an armor for a futuristic soldier.
Yeah,
Can you tell us how all your work for Star Wars began?
Okay, I had a friend 2 doors away who
Yeah.
was a scenic artist. You know, he made canvases for exhibitions. And he was part of the movie industry. He was part of the unions. You had to have a union ticket in 1976 to work in the movies. And I was living here, and I was an industrial designer. I am an industrial designer. And I made my own products. And I was looking to see if there was any work in another industry, like the film business. And so he said to me, I have an inquiry here from, I thought it was for a puppet show. He made puppets, you know.
Yes.
And I need this, and if anything comes of it, I'll give you a drink. But personally, I think it's rubbish, and there's no money in it, and it's a no-hoper. That's what we call films that are never going to work in England. That was his opinion of it. I said, okay, it doesn't matter. And so I made the stormtrooper face because it was interesting, because it had a lot of technical difficulties of how to get a sheet of plastic into undercuts and moulded components. And it was a technical challenge. And so I thought, well, it's something worth doing, and if anybody wants it, I make some money at the end of the day and find a new industry. Fair enough. So that's what I did. And so he gave me 2 little pictures that Ralph McQuarrie had made.
Okay.
And he'd started with a little clay maquette, and he'd had a couple of meetings with George Lucas. But I didn't know it was for Star Wars or anything at the time. So I made the character in about 2 days. You know, there's a DVD of it. I don't know whether you've seen that anyway. And he took it to George Lucas. George Lucas said, great, yes, can I have 50? So I made 50. and that was the start of it. And then they rang me up and said, we've got a panic at the studios, can you come over? Because you're never allowed in the studios if you don't have a union ticket. And so I went to see them, and he said, can you make the armour as well? And he said, because we've been working on the film for 4 months now, and we have only this, and it was 3PO's eye. And we've got 4 weeks before we're shooting in Tunisia. Okay. And we have nothing. And so I went back and made the armour the same way that I made the moulds. The moulds for the stormtrooper helmet. And I got white material made specially for it, a material of ABS with a lot of rubber in it, so the armour would flex a lot, you know. And we made the armour and got it to him just in time for the shoot in Tunisia. It wasn't always complete. It didn't have shoulders, didn't have greeblies, didn't have belts, but they were the early stormtroopers. It hit the production time, and they got the film going in Tunisia, and that was the main criteria of it, really.
You can explain us more the link between the Ralph McQuarrie's concept and your work after that.
Oh, well, Ralph McQuarrie, he was he worked for Boeing aircraft, and so he was space, airplane, aircraft industry orientated, you know. So his concepts were all futuristic. Lucas was more of a cowboy interest, and he wanted originally a stormtrooper with like a Vietnamese. American soldiers, canvas, painted white, and lots of dust, and canvas pouches and ammo packs and things like that on it. Anyway, Ralph McQuarrie made the drawing of a stormtrooper in a hangar, which is a big aircraft hangar to put an aircraft in, and it was really only for scale. It wasn't a character for anything. If you read Ralph McQuarrie's interview, it was just for scale, but Lucas liked it, and so he concentrated on this futuristic sort of character. So he gave me these 2 little pictures he'd made, and I in turn made that into a 3-dimensional character with interpretation of what I could do physically to get plastics to go something like it. And we didn't do too bad a job, but Ralph McQuarrie, I don't think he was that impressed. There's a note upstairs on the board with an interview that says it's all right, but it's not as I would like it. So, you know, it was fair. It was a fair effort, I think.
And could you tell us more about your today's activities and your production and what are you doing today?
Today?
No, what your activities, your today's activities.
Oh, I'm an industrial designer. I have my own products. I like strength for weight products in the sports industry. So I do kayaking, I do windsurfing, I do stand-up board surfing, I do baseball bats, helmets, sports helmets, all these sort of lightweight structural things, you know, bicycles, all sorts of things like that. And I use the film industry really as a support to fund my own plant machinery and my own factory. And it worked very well. After I did Star Wars, which became quite popular very soon, unfortunately I burnt my building down at the end of it. All the plastic had accrued at the back of the building, and it caught fire at night, and the oxyacetylene bottles exploded, and I had no building. And so Shepperton Studios invited me to go there and gave me a big, strong building that I couldn't destroy, which was the old powerhouse, and so I could service the film business for, you know, characters like Star Wars, because once that was popular, a lot of other films came on the back of it, you know, and the next one I did was Superman, and then Alien, and Flash Gordon, Outland, all these films. And I was there making, I think I did about 170 productions in a 5-year period. And then I left the studios and built my own factories because I'd earned enough money.
To stay on Star Wars, can you explain more about the R2-D2 project you have now?
The R2-D2 project, well, I didn't make R2-D2 originally.
No.
A couple of doors away, there was a little engineering shop, and they machined the dome for R2-D2, and I think another lad down at Shepperton made the body, and I think L Street then put it together and made the greaves. It was a mixture of people's efforts on R2-D2. But we have the rights to make anything we want now that's out of date on copyright, because we've just fought a long litigation with Lucas on copyright. Yeah. And as Shepperton Design Studios, I can make R2-D2 or anything, because R2-D2 is 17 years out of date on copyright now. So anybody can make it, but what they can't do is pass it off as Lucas product or Star Wars product or anything. I'm not. That's the Shepperton Design Studios product, so I'm not passing off, I'm afraid. So that's what we've won. We've won our rights to make anything we want.
Okay, and you foresee all the R2 unit, D2 units with different colors of that? You want to
I hadn't thought about it. What I really had thought about was to radio control the R2-D2 and then perhaps open the front of it to have as a fridge to keep the beer in. And then R2 sort of pokes the beer out with a little bit of dry ice, psst, like that. Maybe it's a boy's toy, isn't it? Let's face it. And maybe the lid comes off as a barbecue. It's these sort of funny aspects of R2-D2 that I'm more interested in. Yeah, I can make them blue, pink, yellow, whatever colour you want. But, you know, it's such a funny, iconic little character, and everybody loves it, that I think it's worth concentrating on.
For the stormtrooper armor, can you? There were different size or just one size?
Just one size. I was my own model, so I sort of fitted it there. Yeah.
Oh, you were the model?
I'm afraid so. Yeah. And so I'm 6 feet tall, whatever that is in meters, and bigger than I was. So in 35 years ago, I was thinner than this, and so stormtroopers are relatively thin. And most actors then were about 5 feet 10 and about 10 stone.
And it shows the actors for that, the stuntsmen for that?
Yeah. No, they were
fit in the stormtrooper armor.
They were quite slim in those days.
Oh, yes.
You know, we didn't have McDonald's, and we didn't have French food either. This is what they used to look like in the 19th. Serious, isn't it? We used to make our own clothes. How sad is that?
Yeah,
curtains. Your grandma's curtains.
So
we used to cut our when I finished art school, I made cars, and they were derivatives. I used to like cars, you know. We used to make anything that went fast. This was 1971, and I used to cut up Ford cars to get the engine. This is a twin cam Lotus engine, but I made the chassis, the suspension, the drive chains, and all the bodies. And I made the bodies from a combination of perforated steel compressed in between fiberglass laminates. And that's how they're making Aston Martins now.
Okay.
They've just realised how to make them. So they were pretty good, and they went, you know, they cornered very well. Because the cars, I started making the interiors in plastic, so I built plastic machinery. And so I realised that I could vacuum form on here, sorry. I built this vacuum forming machinery to make kayaks, because I realised you can vacuum form a small piece, but a big piece at the same time. So this machine I had in the shop here, and it was from one end of the shop to the other, and it took electricity from 2 houses. But you could do it, yeah, it was good fun, it was hot. and this is 1976, the hottest year in the last 200 years. And we were pumping out heat. And so the kayaks, which came off, I got the kayaks off every 20 minutes. we had a finished kayak, complete, yeah, out the door.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and we used to store them, yeah, out on the pavement, outside.
I
We used to,
wondered why I saw that. I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
is there some kayaks
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the window? Now it makes
yeah.
sense.
So we put everything out on the pavement to cool down because we have no space. And the same with the Star Wars things. And so you can imagine, on the kayak machine, I could get a complete set of armour, all the moulds for the armour, every 6 minutes. So that's how long the armour took. So to do film work wasn't a big risk for me, even though I had no order and I just did it on a speculative basis. So it wasn't really much of a risk. And so that's how it all started. And it was no risk for Lucas because he had. If I didn't make anything that was any good, he just said I don't want it, and he didn't have a liability, and he liked that as well. But he should have buttoned it up more if he had any sense, and I should have buttoned it up more with a paint. But that was it. That was 1976 for him. So good old years.
Process, the global process, from the mold, from vacuum, and to the finished product.
Okay. So, a friend of mine, Nick Pemberton next door, he gave me these two drawings from Ralph McQuarrie. The one in the hangar and the one in the cantina. And Nick had already started a little clay model that he'd had a couple of meetings with Lucas with to get a direction. And Nick gave me these three things and said, there you are, if you can make anything of it, give me a drink. Do you say that in France? There's no money, but give me a drink. Same sort of thing. So I set about making how to make the actual moulds. I was going to originally do it in slush moulded polyurethane so I could have it all completely three-dimensional. But there was no money, I was doing it free, just speculatively to see if there was any work. And so I decided to do vacuum forming as a prototype. Only a prototype, just to show what to do, because vacuum forming's cheap. And so to make a vacuum forming mould for this, I decided I had to split the helmet somewhere. It has a big undercut on it. Hang on, let's find a helmet. It has a big undercut on it, so it's very difficult to get out of a sheet of material. You know, how do you get a flat sheet of material into all that shape? Pretty tricky. So what I did was I started making a mould. I started using a kayak helmet. I already made a kayak helmet, so I know it's going to fit your head. It's a good start.
Yes,
okay.
just start.
It's a good start. And then I got a bit of plasticine, and on the kayak helmet, start building up a shape to about half an inch from where I know the surface is going to be. So it's only a rough shape, just to give me a shape. So you can do that with, and then I take these materials. I take aluminium dust, very fine, and I take iron and steel dust, the colour of that, coarser, very strong structural material. Then I take very short glass fibre strands, fuzzies we call them, and lastly I take this material which is
Very fine too.
fine, and we call that slag heap, ground up slag heap. You know, the residues of coal. Slag heap. You know when they put the rubbish in a big pile in the coal mines. You know in Belgium they've got these big mountains of slag. What's that slag? Yeah. And so it's cheap material. They're old foundry materials from casting companies, okay? And then we have a resin, just a simple high temperature polyester resin, nothing much. If you mix those components together and catalyse them so that it's actually going hard, you can paint, you can build up, roughly, shape in a structure that's strong enough that you know you can vacuum form over. Because you know it's hollow, so you get the air through it. You've got to suck the air through this, so you've got to make a hollow mould. And then you can make it finer and finer, and you just sandpaper it down by hand, and you can work it by hand before it's cured. We say when it's green. So maybe after 10 minutes of mixing the chemicals together and hitting it with the catalyst, you can start to sculpt it very quickly. And then to make it go hard, you just pop it in the oven, and it goes hard, and you can use harder material. And then you can eventually get to a very shiny finish, because the last coat I spray on the aluminium dust with resin, and to get the final coat, and then you can get this polish, and it becomes a metal mould. And so if you've got a front and a back, at this stage you can pull a vacuum forming over it, but it's a really rough vacuum forming, but it came from there. Then I can see if the front will match the back, and so you can say, okay, I need a little bit more here, a little bit off there, and then you keep pulling sheets of plastic over it until you get them to work correctly, and then they'll fit together. And all sorts of things. Sometimes you can plant little things on the back. It doesn't matter. You can change. You can change their attitude, and then you stick them together. And basically, you accommodate. Also, you make things like a rib there to hold it off to accommodate this. So you already think beforehand what you're going to do as to how you're going to assemble it, because I already had these mouldings. It was the windscreen of my motor car. and so that's all it is. Once you've got two mouldings that are this tight, they fit together, and the job done. And so my friend took that to Lucas. What I did also originally, to get the undercut, I tried to put a serrated hose in there and pull it out every time. So the hose got left behind with the moulding, so the actual mould would release. But I managed to get the full undercut working because I used an old polythene, which was fish pond material. I was making fish ponds, and it's a flexible material. And so I managed, that's got more spring in it, and I could spring that off the mould. And so that's what Nick took to Lucas as the first helmet. The only trouble with the polythene is the paint doesn't stick to it. And the polythene was khaki colour, because they were fish ponds. And so all the first, I think it was 27 helmets, all the paint kept coming off. So there's lumps and bumps, you see them. You see these helmets with paint missing. But after I got the order for the armour, I had the proper ABS material in it. So over half the helmets were made of ABS. And the Hero ones were also ABS. They were the better quality material. Don't worry about that. How much noise can you take? We have to take noise. 1 minute. 1 minute. Get it in the air.
J'ai coupé ça, j'ai fait 2 heures.
Tu restes sur pied d'ailleurs.
Hein?
Tu restes sur pied, tu veux pas.
Ah oui, ça sert à rien.
Il va redescendre.
Il va mettre la
Il va redescendre avec la ça fait thermoformate. Il chauffe ton plastique à je sais pas combien. Ouais. Ah ouais, il faut y aller.
Où est-ce qu'il est, Michel? Tu le vois le truc de là?
Non, je le vois pas.
Tu peux,
là,
il va monter quoi. Tu vois dans le moule là. Non mais là tu peux aller, c'est là-bas que c'est dangereux. Tu restes là.
Il va remonter.
Ouais.
Okay. So, you going?
Yeah.
So we start off with the mould clamped to the bed of the machine. The mould is lowered down into the bowels of the machine. And we have a preheated piece of plastic, acrylic capped ABS. And to make sure there's no dust on the surface. If you get dust on the surface, it will get sucked into the surface of the mould with the heat reaction. And that's what we call a tack rag. It's used for spraying motor cars with paper. Heating cycle, about 2 minutes. hear the vacuum pump pumping. It's up to 28 at the minute. You have the same in France, 30 inches. Inches, no, you wouldn't have inches of mercury. You have 1 atmosphere, don't you?
What?
1 atmosphere. Is that how you measure vacuum?
Vacuum?
Yes.
Oui,
Atmosphere.
l'atmosphère.
Yeah. Okay, it's nearly at 1 atmosphere. With no atmospheres, it's complete vacuum.
Ah bah là, yes. C'est sûr.
No, we've lost our time. Yeah. Generally, you zone the heaters so that they're not all the same heat. You get more heat build up in the middle of a bank of heaters, so you would have less power in the middle than you do on the edges. Or if you have a draft coming in from under there, you put more power on here. Not that you want to know that, but it's something to say. And vacuum form is very simple. It's about the simplest form of plastic molding. Heat a sheet of material up and suck the air out of it. That's all it is. It's very quick. It's very wasteful on material. That's the downside. So you can see the material getting softer. Nice air in there. You can keep it inflated so it doesn't stretch too far out. And you tend to just keep it inflated so the material's heating evenly all over. Unfortunately, the first one never worked right first time. We'll see. So you've got about 30 seconds to go. You can edit this out. Normally you wouldn't have to keep looking at the material once you've got it going and just doing the first one basically. Eight seconds. It's not actually warm enough yet, I know that, even though it's beeping and telling me it should be moulded. So I'll just heat it a bit more yet. And action. So up comes the whole. The reason you've got to materials on each of the heaters and it's trying to keep the gap. It's blown a hole in the side because the material's hotter there than it is over here. It takes about 3 or 4 mouldings to get the whole thing even, you see. So the first one is, but you can see it's quite quick to make the mould. That was hot, that was 200 degrees C when it went over the mould. It was a 2-minute heating cycle, and I would think if we cooled that, we could withdraw. You want to withdraw this because it's got undercuts sooner than it's really cool.
Yes.
But just to the point at which you have to distort it now. Look, distort it. But it's off the roll now, and it's retained its plastic memory because it's already past the part of which it's cooling. And there we are. On place. Time for another. So it's more a prototype process. And that was the idea with Lucas. I originally was just going to vacuum form a couple of prototypes, and then if it was acceptable I was going to make a proper injection moulding tool for polyurethane moulding, which would give me a complete helmet without joining. But he
stayed on the first way to do.
Yeah, he said the prototypes were good enough,
Okay.
that was fine. And he wanted them instantly, you see. Got to have now.
Donc voilà le résultat. So thank you very much, Andrew, for
problem.
that, and for the fans, for the
You can
collectors,
take that one home with
French collectors, Canadian collectors, Belgian collectors.
Belgian collectors indeed.
Thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that process with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Andrew, you
you modeled some stormtrooper helmets, but not only stormtroopers.
Not only
Can you explain us about your work on the other
Okay.
helmets of the
This-
first Star Wars?
This is a very nice helmet. I like this. And this was the X-Wing pilot, which is obviously Luke Skywalker's personal helmet.
Yeah.
I started off, John Mollo gave me a Vietnamese helicopter pilot helmet, and that had a slide down there with the visors. That part was for the visors. So I had something to start with. And looking at it, I just sliced it down the middle, opened it up a bit, and put a nice crown. It was like a bit like a cockerel. You know, you have a crown on an animal. It's his power face, isn't it? And so this crown gave it some height and some depth to it. And then I thought, with the visor, in the future, people will be reading flaps of the visor in front of their faces. Now this was 1976,
Yes.
and I'd heard that aeroplane pilots and fighter pilots were beginning to experiment on having information on their visors. And so that's what this was all about.
Okay.
So I thought from the start, maybe if I made a visor like that, not only did it look, sharper, the information could be on here. It worked. And my thoughts for this now, well, it's been a very successful helmet as Luke Skywalker's, but now I want to make it into a real helmet for motorcycling, mountain biking, and just cycling, climbing, anything, canoeing. Because I have a patented process to make structurally very strong helmets. I make whitewater kayak helmets, and they have a CE
helmets?
No, they have a CE test 5 times as strong as they need to be for whitewater kayaking. And I'll do the same structure on this, and so this can be a helmet for biking and mountain biking. That's good. That would be good fun. I think at this stage, 30 years later, it's thinking how to make something funny. It's about like R2T. Something funny and useful out of just a prop. Up to now, it's just a prop and doesn't do anything. It's just aesthetically pleasing, but it can actually do something as well. I think that's the interest. It's not only simple in shape, which gives us a lot of presence actually. Its attitude, it's kind of angry and it's not. You don't know if he's serious or not because it's so difficult to see his expression, his eyes. And he's pushing his cheek out. So, and it works from no moulds. It's just free-form plastic, which have got a perfect parabola. And this is the same parabola from the same free-form little shape, and just cut out and sort of codged together, we say in England. And it's an easy one. It's just one of those things that worked so easily and was so successful. I think, as far as if you were making props for future films, I think I'd concentrate on this sort of process of concept of making things easily, without extents, without computers, and using nature to form the shapes to get even parabolas, etc. Because look at the refraction on that. Look at the light from it. And if you just turn things over on the edge, you get light on the edge. It's a bit like painting a glass. You just paint the white on the edge of the glass. A bit like Velasquez or who's a good painter of light? Caravaggio. He was really good. He was really good on the edges of light. Yeah. It's that sort of thing in 3D. And it's the same with the armour. If you turn all the edges over, a bit like a Mercedes car, they always turn the edges over. Citroens don't, they cut it off there. English cars are rough. The German cars always finish the edges. You know what I mean? And then they get the three-dimensional look because they get the light. And that's the secret. That's what my theory of the stormtrooper is all about. You've got to make it look as though it was grown on there. It's not just planted on armour.
Yes.
It's actually grown that way. It's organic. And this emphasises it completely. You couldn't imagine that's a human being.
That's it.
This is from
It gives the
somewhere
characters
else. It's from somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to get to. Yeah. I love that one. It's really good. Put the camera up. See that planet?
So we have 3 different variations of the Rebel helmet.
Yeah.
So can you explain us more about it? It's very simple.
Very, very simple. Again, it's the same free-form shape that came from the jawbone there, or the gunner helmet. And this is ridiculously simple.
Yes.
It takes minutes to make.
But it's why it works.
It's why it works, yes. And just by putting a visor, again from the same shape of freeforming, up or down, it becomes defensive, like a defensive helmet, or this just becomes a general, officer. Or in this format, I wanted to, John Mollo asked me for something a bit like a samurai. And if you remember samurais, they have lacquer on their armour, and their armour's made of paper mache and lacquer. And so this is to simulate that. And if I put a matte material there, it emphasises the lacquered part on the front. And just because I put holes in it, I called it a cheesebreaker. It's Emmental cheese, isn't it? Because it didn't have a name, it didn't have a character. But John Mollo just asked for two baddies. So he became a Navy. Navy trooper in the end, yeah.
Can you show me an
Simple. And then just a simple plastic cone, piece of plastic bent around. That's all it is. And see this emphasis of a samurai you see in Ralph McCory's drawings for Darth Vader. He also started with a cowering thing, so it worked on that sort of theme. Because I made this one before they made Darth Vader.
You added something for the actors inside the helmet?
Well, only a bit of foam. That's
only that.
Yeah. You need no more. And elasticated. Again, this is from, I think that's from a canoeing helmet.
Yes. Going through your R2-D2 unit, can you explain us about your work about it?
It's a copy as accurately as I can make a copy of the real one. And I think the real one was made by several people, and it's ended up an iconic, very friendly character. I have a few thoughts on it. One, we'll radio control it so it can walk along, and probably put sensors on it, parking sensors on cars. Well, you can make it walk around the house and miss things quite easily and do the hoovering. And I'll probably do a cut line there and make this open so that we can have the beer fridge inside. And then maybe if this opened as well, it could be the barbecue. So that could be a radio controlled R2-D2 handing you the beer and say, R2, bring me a beer.
Definitely R2.
And it's that sort of funny aspect of it that I'm more interested in. Not sort of, alright, I'll get it as accurate in detail as possible. That's not a big problem. What's far more interesting is making it into a funny product that's part of people's lives, If it hands you out a beer, there's nowhere else to go, is it? That's as good as it gets. French beer, of course.
French beer.
Oh, of course.
Belgian beer.
Belgian beer.
Michel is Belgian. From Belgium.
All right.